You're listening to Clear and Loud, a show about finding meaning and purpose on the other side of shifting beliefs. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Sarah, welcome to the Clear and Loud podcast. It's great to have you.
It's good to be here.
I am really excited to talk about this topic of building community if you're not active in a church. And I want to just start by saying community is such a buzzword. Like everybody talks about it. Everybody says they want it. My gym says they're building community. Everybody's building community. What does that actually mean to you when you think of the phrase building community?
Yeah, what a great question. I actually spent, I would say, a solid 6 months grappling with this question. What do I even mean by community? So backtracking a little ways, when we moved out of intentional living community, which we can talk about later, and moved into a single family dwelling in a new neighborhood, in a new town, not connected to any sort of organized anything, I would go for these walks in my neighborhood and be like, I just want a community. And then I would have this conversation with myself, like, what do you even mean, Sarah? What is a community?
Right.
And right away I noticed, I have all these friends. Like I had quite quickly made new relationships, built friendships. And yet there was something lacking between having a collection of friendships and something I would call a community. And at its most basic level, it felt like I want friends that also know each other. Not just a friend over here and a friend over there. And like, I want a collective somehow that are gathered together around a common something. What is that common something that they are gathered around? I would love it for it to be more than just me. I don't want them to just be gathered around me. And when you look at the definition of community, it is that it's a group of people that share something in common, a place,
they're
an interest.
interconnected to each other, but something bigger.
Exactly. And sometimes, with different meanings, people will talk about, the community I live in, and they're talking about their neighborhood, but there's a truth there. We're all people that share in common the place in which we live. But are we something that has actually gathered around more like a commitment to each other in some way?
Right.
That's different. Or the school community we're part of. All our kids share in common the same school. That is by definition a community. But what we're itching for or talking about the thing people are hungry for is more than just that surface level. We have something in common. I think it's some sort of connection with each other, and maybe even more so, some sort of commitment to something together.
That's really helpful. This is something that I think about so much. My wife, Kelly, and I talk about it all the time. And I feel like it's so tied to my upbringing, being in the church, spending decades of my life in the church. So grateful for many parts of that. Now in a season where I'm not actively attending church. I still go sometimes, but I'm not actively attending. And it does feel like there's this big gaping hole where church just sort of instantly gave shared purpose, shared values. And I interact with a lot of people now. I think a lot of listeners to this podcast who are now not in the church, whether because their beliefs changed or even if they're still very much a Christian, a believer, but they're not attending. So I feel like that's a big part where I keep having this longing and I'm trying to figure this out. Do you hear that from people or do you feel that yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things when you talk about church specifically that I think makes church communities unique is that it brings, because the common commitment is around a shared, in theory, a shared belief system or a shared values set. And therefore, demographically, you might get a range of folks. Generationally, you get a range of folks. And you get something that can be, and not always, of course, more diverse than, for example, like gathering around a shared interest in running. Okay, I went to a running group and
That's
now
true.
the main thing we're talking about is running because we're all into running, I guess. That's a different experience than gathering around something that carries some depth of meaning for folks, that draws in a range of people. And so I think one of the things that folks that have actively been part of a church community that have since, for whatever reason, like you said, stepped away, find themselves craving more than just a common interest group, or more than participating in a class or a book club or something like that. They're kind of hungry for, how do I end up amongst other people who are committed to doing life alongside each other in some way, shape, or form, right? There's actually something unique in the depth. Again, not always, but that many people have experienced at least a taste of inside a church community. And when you've experienced it, the absence of it feels real. There's grief there.
Right. You are a leadership and relationships dynamic coach and a community builder. I got these cool phrases from your website. You founded Our Common, which is a coaching and consulting practice. And the thing that I came across that I was so fascinated by is that you're actually teaching a course called Our Common Life that's about building community. So people are doing this 4-month-long course with you because they want to build some type of community. And I was so intrigued by that, just that whole concept. What are the people who are, participating in this course with you? What's the motivation? Do they have different types of goals? What are the communities that they're trying to build?
Yeah. Well, I think the first, this is its 4th year running. And the first year that I ran it, I initiated this course because I wanted somebody to join me in this conversation of what even is community? What is it I'm really looking for? I keep saying I want this thing, yet I have some version or elements of it, wanting to get clear on my own unique longings and my own unique vision for community, and wanting people to come alongside me, both in the conversation, but also in the walking it out. Because for years I'd had all these ideas I'm going to start a neighborhood soup night. I'll make a big pot of soup and I'll invite all the neighbors, or I'll get some friends together and we'll do a dinner group. Or I had all these different ideas of how I might initiate community, and watched myself not execute on them. And so the initial birth of the program came around me being okay, enough. I need people to get together and have this conversation. And of course, I put it out to the world. Hey, who else is hungry for lived experience of tangible community? Who wants to reimagine the village in their everyday life with me and make it happen? Not just talk about it theoretically, but actually put it into action. And I maybe tell that story because I think about myself as maybe the first beta participant in the program that I was running.
Yeah.
And I had all these ideas and longings, and I'd had these tangible experiences of community, and was wanting to translate that into my new context. And so I think a lot of folks are in that sort of a circumstance where they've experienced some version of community in their past, maybe in their childhood or in their even recently, and they've been through some sort of transition. Maybe they've moved to a new place, or suddenly they've had kids and they didn't have kids before, and they're finding themselves isolated in new ways, or their schedule has changed, or they've stepped away from an organized community group in some way. And so they're aware of what they're missing, and they're needing a space to reimagine and execute, not just talk about or theorize. So I'd say a lot of folks are in some sort of liminal or transition stage. Even you described yourself and Kelly landing in a new place all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah.
And the projects or the things, the community initiatives folks are executing on range all the way from I think I just want to know the names and the stories of the people on my block. I want to start there. I want to get to know the people who are close to me. Or we've had folks who've wanted to start, there was a young woman who started a women's circle and wanted to initiate and gather that around. I've seen people initiate projects related to growing things and gardening. I saw somebody start a home church project in one round.
Really? Okay.
Of the program, who wanted to gather people together and do church differently. So there's been a whole host, and there have been folks who are like, I'm not even sure quite what the vision is. And we work through that together, looking at the longings under
so
the
they don't
longings.
have to come with a specific project. They might just come with the longing. I want my life to look different.
Yeah, a longing and a readiness. I would say I have all these workshops that are kind of like getting your juices flowing around community building, and some of the practical pieces around like, how do I just get to know the people in my build some neighborhood community, for example. I would say the folks that are coming into that Our Common Life program are ready to take some steps. They're not just like community curious, wanting to ideate and theorize. They're like, okay, hold my hand. Let's get like, it's totally terrifying, but help me invite 5 friends to come do this thing with me, or again, whatever it may be, because so much of the learning around building community happens in the practice of it. We don't know what the fears are we have, which so often are around rejection or disappointment or not being met in our needs, or like any other relational thing. But we don't really know the details of those fears or how to work through them until we're in it. And so we need this space to practice together.
That's really good. What are some of the mistakes or speed bumps or challenges that you see people encounter in that process?
What a great question. One of the things I see often happen is in the process of community building, I have it mapped out sort of into these 5 steps, which begins with the visioning, the ideating for oneself. And you can have that held or supported or guided. And I have all kinds of prompts to get folks doing that, but really getting clear, like, what actually is it that I'm wanting to create? What do I imagine that feeling like, and what elements will be part of it? And which leads you into the invitation to call people in to some sort of collaborative or co-creative process, right? We have an initial spark of an idea before we invite people to join us. And in particular, when people are wanting to co-create a community, not just like, I'm going to start a group and lead it and run it and in perpetuity be in charge of it until I'm totally exhausted and burnt out and feel like if I stepped away for a minute, no one would carry it on without me, right? That's a different kind of initiative. But if we're looking to call people in to collaborate with us and to co-create and cultivate community together, one of the steps I see people really missing is gathering the buy-in, like the enrollment. So that now we're together and I've shared the vision. I've invited you to now like massage the vision with me a little bit, to infuse it with your own pieces and can we be in that process to the point where we say, okay, like we've got enough of an idea. Let's get some of the details on paper and make it happen. People often want to jump to the details. Like, okay, how often are we going to meet? And they're looking for people's commitment before there's the buy-in or that like collaborative ideating stage of things.
Where people feel some sense of ownership, co-ownership of the whole idea.
Yes. And then a lot of people at that stage back out. They're like, whoa, hold on. What do you mean? You want me to commit to how often? And what are we talking about?
Right. Yeah.
Is that making sense?
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. And going back to something you said earlier, that people are longing for a common purpose that's deeper than just an activity. How do you create that if you don't have that faith piece? Like, and again, I'm not anti the faith piece. I think that's beautiful. I'm still exploring and asking lots of different questions. But one of the things I think at times is when I look at society and culture, is it impossible to really build meaningful, community like we're talking about without some kind of religious element, because that gives this deep purpose, this, eternal kind of purpose to the group. What are some of the ways to say, hey, this is more than just we like the same activities. This community is built around X. I don't know what X is if it's not religious belief.
Well, I think oftentimes, if you peel back the layers, even in a religious community, often what we're talking
Mm,
about is being centered or around a shared set of values or some shared
right.
commitment to a certain type of way of life, perhaps.
That's actually not just like, here are our doctrines we believe. There's actually, it's like the values or the maybe
Do you
not
disagree?
more significant. No, no, I do. I think I'm just trying to say, like, I think my mind can go to, like, here's this religious belief that we all have. And we all believe the same doctrine. But what I hear you saying is there's actually this, here's the kind of life that we all want, or the kind of values we want to be marked by,
Right. And of
is
course,
actually even more important.
some churches get into trouble with that, right? Like where that becomes so structured or almost like rules oriented that your sense of
I can't imagine that ever happening.
your sense of belonging in that space
Yeah.
is tied to, am I checking all these boxes? But
Mm-hmm.
when we look at the essence of that in maybe its healthiest form, there is, um, something that makes a lot of sense for humans to
Yeah.
gather around a shared sense of like, oh, okay, we all actually really value time with our kids. Okay, well
Yeah.
then if that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we share in common, then we're going to be interested in orienting our schedules and our lives around activities
Mm-hmm.
that include the adults and the kids together. Okay, that's at
Yeah.
a really simple level. There's nothing wrong in
Mm-hmm.
that. Of course, there's a complexity for folks who think, well, how do I join that group if I don't have the kids? And you start to get questions around where is it
Right.
okay
Yeah.
to create a group or to cultivate a sense of community that's more exclusive versus broad
Mm-hmm.
and inclusive. And I don't mean in the sense of certain types of people are allowed in and are allowed out, but it's
Right.
actually, there's a true question that comes up even outside of religion around like, what kind of
Yeah.
community do I want to cultivate? And what are some of
Yeah.
the ways of being together that
Mm-hmm.
I want us to share? And what happens if that changes for somebody? And now we're into those questions about
Yeah.
really ultimately always it comes back to questions about belonging,
Mm.
which is why so often folks leave the church is they're like, oh, it feels so exclusive to belong. You have to check all these boxes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know I kind of went off away from your question. And so to pull it,
No, all of
I
this I
raised
think is
more
so interesting.
questions.
No, it's good. I was just reflecting on the fact that part of the issue, I think, for me is the church created contexts, and there were just kind of like immediate common values and so on. And in a way, it was doing the work for me. And now suddenly I'm having to ask some of these questions, like, well, what would that look like? How would I want to build that? And it's almost like muscles that I haven't exercised because there was this prepackaged, here you go,
Yeah.
slot yourself into this and everything's provided. Here are your small groups. And then you had all these different types of seasons of life that you could participate with, single, married, all those kinds of things. But maybe not actually having that ownership or responsibility in the same way because it was someone else had already decided it. So I'm just realizing as you're talking, like, there are actually really, things to wrestle with here that
Yes.
maybe people haven't, had a chance to do, but it's so important.
Yes.
It's such a huge part of, I think, thriving as a human.
Yes. In the process of creating community, one of the things I talk about in my group with folks when they're in that kind of discernment that can happen around between the kind of initial visioning and ideating and calling people in. And then what if now I've called the people in and they've got a totally different vision that feels divergent from my own? And the question becomes that I often put to folks is, is the vision kind of vision first? Like, I'm really clear on what I want to create. I want it to be, whatever, a dinner group, and we're going to really gather and we're going to be in each other's homes and we're going to cook meals together. And I'm kind of open to who's going to be a part of that. Like the vision I'm really pretty attached to, the what and the who, I'm curious, like who will come around that same shared vision. And then once we become or form a group, there might be some questions down the road about what happens if if desires or needs change. But initially
Right.
there's kind of like a vision first approach
Mm-hmm.
versus I've seen a lot of groups that they're like, okay, we're a group of 5 friends already. Now
It's more about the people first.
right,
Yeah.
we've got this group of people and we want to create something that feels a bit more like less just like friends that see each other in an impromptu way. We want to organize ourselves in a way that feels more like community. Maybe we're even interested in, purchasing some land together and
Oh, wow.
revillaging, or maybe we're
Wow.
interested in whatever it is, organizing ourselves in a more
Mm-hmm.
formal way. And the orientation is the people first. It's like, okay, this is the
Mm-hmm.
group and we're committed to this group of people. And now we're
Mm-hmm.
going to work the idea. We're going to work the vision together. And there are different approaches. There are different community
Right.
building journeys. And
Yeah.
I don't really believe one is right or wrong. They're just different and they actually require a different discernment and a different attentiveness
Mm-hmm.
to what's coming up between you. And it's so helpful to be clear going into it with yourself as
Yeah.
you're ideating. Am I attached
Mm-hmm.
to it looking this particular way? And then I'm going to go out and find the people who are interested in the same thing. Or are there particular people in my life I really want to call into greater depth and connection and intimacy?
Yeah.
Therefore, am I open to exploring with them what collectively might spark interest and be in a kind of consensus process till we can find something that aligns for all of us?
That's really good. Just to even be honest at the outset of what you're leading with, what the first priority is.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, let's say you have a group of friends and there's some kind of consistency. You've got your little circle, but it doesn't feel as purposeful or as meaningful. And I'm thinking about how in church kind of contexts, the cycle of teaching or we're going to talk about our marriages or, those types of things create the sort of focus to get more involved in each other's lives. When you don't have that, what are some ways to kind of deepen the connection or the types of interactions that are taking place? Like I have a good friend, Scott, in Vancouver, who, when he has friends over for, tacos or whatever, he comes with a specific question and he's got this moment where he's kind of a pastor at heart. He kind of turns everything into a little church meeting, but he has a moment where he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to answer this question. And it's very familiar to me because that's similar to like a small group setting or that type of thing in a church. But for a lot of people in Scott's little world, it's like so refreshing. And I've heard people say like, wow, like, I go and I hang out with other people all the time. I've got different friends, but these kind of moments feel so different. They feel so much more intentional. I feel like I get to know others. They hear me, that kind of a thing. What do you see is needed to kind of take that sort of step? Is it that kind of, intentional questions, or let's share about our marriages, or like, what do you see actually works?
It can be. Here's what's coming up. So a couple thoughts. One, I think, is being clear at the outset on the purpose of a gathering, or if we can, being clear in the invitation. Not just like, hey, let's get together and hang out, but like, hey, let's get together to really deepen our friendships and go deep on a question together, right? You could
There's a purpose.
Set that intention ahead of time, even in the invitation, because there's something, when we think about cultures that orient around consent, there's something of like, for the non-vulnerable introvert who shows up at the gathering, they're like, whoa, wait a second. Nobody
Don't spring this on them.
Told me this was coming. So I really love that just as a general practice, like, especially if you're just creating a one-off event as opposed to creating something ongoing and you want there to be some depth to it. You can certainly name a purpose or name an intention in your invitation that kind of sets the expectation or the tone, or even in the welcome. Like, I'm so glad we're all together. My hope is that we're going to leave feeling like we all know each other better. Right.
That's
it can
good.
be as simple as that, to set an intention. And then the 3 components I often speak to, and you see this, churches do this quite well, I think, that help a group move from kind of a more surface level into some depth. One is ritual, which, church has all these elements of ritual, we know.
Definitely.
And even what you're talking about. Yeah, I know when Scott invites me over, he's going to ask us a prompt and we're going to go around the circle and answer the prompt. There's a ritual element to that. In my potluck group, we have these 5 families that get together for dinner twice a month, which was my first project, the first round of our common life.
Very cool.
And it's been going for a few years now. And right before we eat, I facilitate a circle. And it's kids and adults. There's like about 25 of us when we're all together. And, the prompt is different every week, but we know that we're going to ask the prompt and everyone's going to respond to the prompt, kids and adults together, before we start the meal. That's it. That's the whole amount of ritual we have. It's really simple. We call it circling up. It's really, there's nothing complicated or fancy about it. We call it what it is. I offer a prompt and around we go. So ritual is one of those things that creates a sense amongst folks of, well, this is more than just a hangout. There's and ritual or ceremony doesn't have to be, incense and sagebrush. It can absolutely be as simple as a consistent prompt. We have a family ritual before dinner every night around saying a gratitude practice. It's like super simple. Anyone that comes to our home now, they've been here for dinner, they know there's the Wildmans, we have this ritual before dinner. So ritual is one. And the other two, which I also think church often does well, is shared work, coming around a project together, or orienting with an attitude or a posture of service together.
That's so good. Yeah.
So, whether that's helping somebody out in your group or helping somebody out externally, a friend of a friend needs help moving, and could we all get together and go help that friend move? And now we're working alongside each other and we're chatting and we're connecting while we're passing boxes back and forth. There's a different kind of connection that happens when you've worked alongside someone.
That's really true.
Yeah. And the last piece is play, shared play. And I think the best is when you can get in a group all three, not every time, but when you can pepper in elements of ritual, work, and play. These 3 kind of ingredients help take a sense of like, oh yeah, we just kind of hang out sometimes, into like, these are people that I know. And there's something about having the efforting or the serving alongside each other, and the laughing and the silliness and the free flow nature of play, and the sacred depth of ritual that allows a group to shift. I don't know if I can quite put words to it. There's a bit of magic in it that allows a group to shift or form.
I love those 3 categories. I mean, they're like so obvious, but I've not heard somebody, put them alongside each other as being kind of key elements. And I would just affirm that the people I feel closest to, I've had those experiences with. I'm just struck by the thought of how groups of people, maybe they're in each other's lives, maybe they're in each other's neighborhood, whatever it might look like, could live so much of their life and miss out on this kind of connecting just because nobody took the initiative. Like you could have consistent parties and everyone's over at your house, and yet the lack of that simple initiative to add these elements of ritual and play and service. So I'm just thinking about how it's like, it takes at least that one person that says, hey guys, let's be more purposeful in this moment. Let's pause, let's serve, let's create this activity that we can have play together. What are the kind of I guess the question I want to ask is this: your experience with your potluck group, what was that like starting it, and how has it evolved? Has it changed in ways you didn't expect?
Yeah. Well, I really started it with this framework of, there was a vision, there was an idea, there was an invitation, and the first initial invitation was quite clear and specific, because there were certain parts of my vision that I was attached to. Like, I wanted it to be consistent. I wanted it to be something that everyone that was going to say yes to would commit to at least trying it out together, kind of a beta run. Could we do this for 3 months together in a consistent and committed way? Like, could we prioritize our schedules so that we actually make this happen? Because I know.
So you started with a 3-month commitment. Like,
I started with at
least 3 months.
Well, the first invitation was, hey, here's the idea. I want to create a group where we're going to, and actually a friend and I, we went for a walk. We talked through this idea, and then her and I sat down. So that was great, because it was like, there was a little collaborator partner in the ideating. And we talked about, okay, well, what would be realistic and what would we want it to be? Okay, we wanted it to be in each other's homes. We wanted it to be where adults and kids were connecting. What we really were both longing for was also for our children was relationships with other adults other than us. None of us, both her and I don't have immediate family here, so no intergenerational relationships. And so our kids have that with their teachers, but it's so different to have adults that you feel safe with, that aren't your parents, that aren't your grandparents, that feel like they are interested in you and they know you. So we had a few kind of core elements that we knew we wanted. So the initial invitation was to a pretty broad group of folks, which actually, in retrospect, if everyone had said yes, we would have been hooped because it would have been way too many people for a potluck group. But we reached out to a pretty broad group of people and said, you know, here's the ideas that we'll get together for meals. We think twice a month. We would love it to be adults and kids together. We'd love it to be in and out of each other's homes. And we're looking for people who are interested to commit, you know, for at least 3 months. So if you think you might be interested, let's get together for a picnic. So that was where we had the like buy-in stage.
Were you just, this is like such a detailed question. Were you just like sending little text messages to people or email?
We drafted together, we drafted a shared, like a text, and then we copied and pasted it to, I don't know, a dozen folks. Yeah. And we didn't have totally overlapping circles. So we had a few folks where we knew, and she was like, I'd really like to invite this couple. And I was like, I'd really like to invite this family. Actually, there was one family in my neighborhood who was in my community building course at the time. And I was like, I have to invite this family because they're in my program and they're going to hear all about this project. Also, they're great friends of ours. So it worked out well. But we kind of came up with a list. And the interesting thing is the folks who showed up for that first picnic gathering to discuss, like, okay, do we have enough of it? And we kind of talked, okay, what would we want to get out of it? So that was where we got the buy-in, the kind of co-creative stage. The folks that showed up, it was kind of like, okay, here's what we're thinking. You know, what else would people be interested in? There was kind of like this shared visioning process. And by the end of that conversation, and I really am a bit of a driver, so I was like, okay, are we in enough to commit to this thing until Christmas? This was kind of end of August. So we're like, September through Christmas, could we do that?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, yeah. And so then right then and there, we just put the dates into the calendar. What day of the week?
I love it. Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing is those 5 families have, so initially it was a little bit vision driven, right? When I talked about those 2 different, it was like, here's the vision. Let's cast the net wide and see who shares a common vision or a common longing to come together around what was quite a specific invitation. And then once we got that buy-in, now we've been together going on 3 years. I would say we've shifted into a community or people driven. So now I'm pretty sure we haven't had this yet, but if somebody from our group said, I would really love to see us meet once a week, or, you know, the day of the week is no longer working for our family. Could we shift the day of the week? We wouldn't say, well, here's the vision, get in or get out. We'd be like, okay, well, now we're committed to each other. We're these. We got to
keep the crew together.
That's right. So let's bring the vision back to the table, or work it again so that we can get aligned again in a way that's going to help us move forward. And that doesn't mean somebody couldn't at some point say, you know, our family's going to opt out. This isn't working for us anymore. Everyone is free to go. And yet there is this shared commitment that's carried through this 3 years of saying, we're not just going to do this when it's convenient to us or do this when it works for us. We're actually going to commit and prioritize, like when our kids want to sign up for activities, and actually potluck's on Thursday night and that activity's on Thursday night, like we might opt for, can you pick something else or not this season?
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Which radical prioritization in today's busy world is sort of necessary if you want to build community. And again, it's one of the things church does well. It's like everyone's blocked Sunday morning in their schedule or Saturday evening. And, you know, even if you had a bit of a tiff in the morning, we're going to show up and we're going to go and we're going to be there. And, you know, maybe that friend that we usually hang out with is away on vacation, but we're going to connect. We know we'll connect with someone because we're going. And interestingly, the folks who all said yes to my invitation, which held this element of commitment to it, all happened to be families that at some point in time were involved in some way in church life, and mostly in quite significant ways. What I make up about that is that they all understand the practice of committing to a thing and prioritizing it in their schedule and orienting around it and showing up even when it's kind of inconvenient.
Right. And also the great benefit that comes from that commitment.
Totally. Which a lot of people, I think, just don't, if you didn't grow up with that, a lot of folks got back to me and said, this sounds really cool, but there's no way I can commit to twice a month. Right? Like, it's just a culture we live in. And so there's something there if you have had that experience. And if you haven't had that experience, or you have some kind of trigger around like commitment, feels like there's something demanding there, you might set a different agreement together. You might say, hey, when this is turning into a should, or starting to feel pressurized, or I'm starting to feel guilty if I can't make it, well, you might need to have a different conversation as a group around what works for you. That's certainly not a rule of thumb that you need to hold an element of commitment. But that was something in terms of my vision, busy family life in a suburban neighborhood, that felt necessary.
It's so true. Yeah, there's so many competing activities that would really quickly pull it apart if you didn't ask for that at the beginning. So this is twice a month that you do these potlucks with the same group of families, and you've been doing it for 3 years. Has that led to, even more interaction because you're seeing each other that consistently?
Yeah, totally. I think those elements, so we have this element of ritual, which is as simple as this prompt. And there's been a few times we've tried it. We have a group chat. We've tried it. Folks will send out a podcast and be like, hey, listen to this podcast this week. If anyone else is interested, have a listen. Maybe we can chat to it when I see you on potluck, kind of thing. And sometimes that's taken off where a few people have listened to it, and then some folks end up in a deeper conversation. And we've put it to the group a number of times around, like, what if the adults stuck around after and had a bit of a discussion group or had a deeper check-in?
Yeah.
It hasn't quite formed because of the practicality of life with kids and school nights and bedtimes.
Right.
But there's certainly, so a couple, one of our rituals, we do these spotlight nights. We do it once a month where we pick 2 people that get spotlighted, and kids or adults. And my one friend asks them ahead of time a bunch of fun facts about themselves. And then we play this little game. She reads the fact and you have to vote on who it is. And it's playful and it's a bit of a ritual, and it allows us to deepen in. And then somebody in their family takes some time to affirm them in the group space where they get witnessed and seen and built up and celebrated for who they are. And it's a little vulnerable for those that don't like to be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And yet it's been this beautiful, again, I would call it's like a merging of ritual and play that allows us to get to know each other deeper, and for the kids to feel really seen and celebrated by the adults, and vice versa. So there's been elements like that. And then honestly, we've had a bunch of work projects over the last number of years. We built a sauna. We put it in the group thread. At some point, everyone showed up,
That's great.
to wield a hammer. Even, our friends' kids came to pass boards or hammer in a nail. It's just such a neat thing.
That's such a, can you think of a more 2025 version of a barn raising than come and help us build our sauna?
I know. And then we,
sauna raising.
Then we get to have a sauna night together, or sauna afternoon.
I love it.
We cold plunge together. The kids do a lot of, like, when one of us goes out of town, our friends' kids will look after our dog, and my kids will look after their chickens, or somebody else's kids look after somebody else's bunnies. There's a lot of animal care happening.
That's great.
So there's care within us. And then there's been a few projects where we've taken on, I don't really like the word service project, but where one of the women in our group works with a really marginalized group of folks in our broader community in the greater Vernon area. And so she's been able to bring, hey, there's, this family in need, a single mom. Can we pitch in? And so for about a year, every time we did potluck, we packed up extra food, and one of us would volunteer to bring it to this mom and her infants.
Yeah.
Little ways that you can, again, create that sense of, like, we're not just gathering for our own sakes, but how can we now take what's been so nurturing for us as a group and so generative and life-giving and outpour from that place. And that didn't happen right away. It took time for us to get to know each other and build connection and commitment. But yeah, lots of elements there.
Will you tell me a little bit of why you care so much about this topic? Like from your own life and story, what are some key shaping moments that have made this so important to you?
Before I speak to that, when you were talking earlier about, like some people could go through their whole life and never experience some piece of this because no one initiated.
Yeah.
There's this, and I encounter a lot of folks like this in my work who are like, I just grew up hyper independent. Like my family, we didn't eat dinner together. We didn't have people over. I never went to other people's houses. Like you don't ask anybody for help. You just do the things.
Yeah.
A
lot of people.
Yeah, who are in their 40s, 50s, who've never experienced a shared meal at somebody's home or who've never felt like they could ask for help in a time of need. And I think, when there's so many heartbreaking things in the world, but the things that often hit us in a particular pain point are those things that we have experienced as beautiful or sacred or life-giving, and we see the absence of them for others. And ultimately, I would speak just to the fact that I have experienced a very rich communal life. From the time I was a young kid, I very much experienced the interweaving of our family life with other families and with other singles and folks from different cultures and backgrounds. And that has shaped who I am and has been such a source of life for me, for lack of a better word, vitality for me.
Yeah.
And having lived, so I mentioned this, we lived in 2 different living communities. And I think the passion around this really evolved when we moved to where we are now. And I referenced those lonely walks in the neighborhood, being like, feeling the grief of the absence of what I had so intimately known. And then recognizing my grief wasn't just for myself. My grief was for anyone who had never experienced a life of interdependence or interweaving, and that didn't feel like they had people they could call in a time of need, or groups where they felt seen and known and where there was depth or life alongside each other. And so that grief became something that I felt became a role to steward, like not just to feel the grief on behalf of myself and what I was experiencing as a loss, but also to grieve on behalf of the collective, like on behalf of a world of kind of hyper independence, which has really shaped and formed the purpose and vision for so much of my work, which is around creating a more interconnected world.
Amazing. So you saw, because of what the life that your parents led your family in, the hospitality and so on, you experienced that when you were younger. What are these 2 communities you referenced you were part of, kind of purposeful communities or something? What did that look like?
Yeah. And for us, both of those were tied to faith-based organizations. So when my husband was graduating university and we were looking for a great grand adventure, we came across this Christian wilderness center in the Rocky Mountains. And long story short, came to be invited to run this little discipleship school, an adventure Bible school program, which I often reference now as like an adventure leadership program when I'm not speaking maybe in a Christian context. And so really, ultimately, we didn't go there for the sense of like community living. We went there because, here's this cool program we've been asked to run. And it's based out of essentially a year-round summer camp, if you can picture what the experience is like.
Right.
But because it was so remote, everyone that worked there lived there. And there was 5 families that were year-round on staff that lived in their own homes. We all had our own homes on site in a big kind of mess hall gathering space where meals happened 3 times a day, shared meals. And then a lot of a lot of seasonal staff. So there was like a female staff house and a male staff house where there would be young adults that would come and live usually for like a year or something on staff.
Yeah.
And we lived there for 3.5 years, running this program, sharing life alongside these other families that also worked there in different capacities. Our first child was born in that context. Like 3 nights a week, we would put our baby to bed and just take our monitor next door while our baby slept. And we'd have like hangouts with our friends, like these other 4 couples.
Incredible.
We'd sit in the living room like 3-4 nights a week hanging out together. Just so deeply intertwined because of how remote we were, especially.
Right.
There was not really like other things to be involved in. You didn't have to prioritize in the same way. There was not so many demands.
It was so focused. That must have been incredible.
It was really life shaping. I think when you think about, especially Jesse, my husband will reference this, as a young man, as a young dad, to have male friends that were so close, that got together so frequently. There was like 4 of them. They'd do Scotch nights, like multiple nights a week. Scotch tasting nights, or because it was an outdoor wilderness center, we also had a shared kind of common passion and interest in outdoor activities and outdoor pursuits. So not only are you getting together, here it is, a little ritual.
Yeah. Play,
laughter together, play out in nature, mountain biking, backpacking, canoeing, climbing, rappelling, all the, ice climbing, all the activities together. But working alongside each other, living in this working environment where we're working alongside each other, and then doing life, watching passing each other's babies around, and changing each other's babies' diapers, eating meals, 3 meals a day together. The whole shebang. It was like all of the theory we're talking about in hyper intensity,
Yeah.
And again, because of that element of being somewhat isolated, there was an added depth to that dynamic, and really grateful that it happened to be a really amazing group of folks, like not a lot of conflict, the odd human thing, people are annoying each other or whatever. But so we moved from that context. So we were there 3.5 years, and we moved from that context to live and work at another Christian nonprofit, which is an environmental Christian nonprofit, faith-based, with an environmental focus. And again, a similar type setting, large farm property where the orientation was less around outdoor recreation and more around sustainable agriculture and environmental education. Conservation science. And then there was also kind of a guest house, and there I ran an international internship program. And so that was also kind of stewarding a 3-month program, which was similar to what we were doing before, except instead of taking folks backpacking, we were sending them out to the fields to help in the garden or run a kids program.
Amazing. But a similar format where you're sharing life together, you're sharing meals together.
Exactly, in a similar format. So a few differences, and it was interesting because even no matter what your experience of community is, when you shift to a different experience of community, you bring subtle expectations, and often ones you don't even know, subconscious ones you don't even know you're carrying. So we showed up in what most people would think of as a pretty intensive experience of community. We did 9 meals a week together. So dinner 4 nights and lunch together 5 days a week. But all our other, weekends and breakfasts were at home. And again, 5 families living on property, and interns that were coming every 3 months, and some guests and volunteers coming and going. So both a core group and also a bit of a transient group, which was the same as our other community experience. But the real difference was this community is oriented in a suburb. Lots of folks had their kids in activities. They had family nearby or friends.
It wasn't as intense as the camp.
It wasn't as intense. And I got there and was like, well, why aren't we all hanging out 3 nights a week? Like, what's the deal? Like, I thought we were all going to be best friends with each other. And actually, you have these other commitments. And it was so interesting to see my own reveal around these expectations I had brought and my disappointments. And I remember processing those disappointments with a mentor at one point. And she said, well, at what point did anyone else agree to like that's what community was going to be? And I was like, yeah, this is just me holding this standard or this expectation of these other people I'm living with that has nothing to do with what we've actually created a shared commitment around or a shared agreement around, right? It was just my own subtle expectation, which began a long journey towards really deepening my understanding of being explicit and clear and having those conversations with each other around who are we trying to be for each other, and what are the things we need to commit to or agree to together to help cultivate who we want to be to each other? And are we on the same page? Are we wanting the same kinds of things out of this relationship or out of this group or out of this gathering? And can we be honest and clear with ourselves and with each other in those conversations such that they can meet us in those longings?
Yeah. Right.
It's essentially making our desires, our expectations spoken so we can get in conversation around them.
That's so good. Hearing all that background helps me understand why you would be so good at this consulting, where you're going into organizations, you're helping them figure out how they're communicating and the culture they're building, all those types of things. The community building piece is just one part of the work that you do in your coaching and consulting. Tell me more about the kind of leadership and relationship coaching that you spend a lot of time doing for your clients.
Yeah. Well, what I've loved discovering through this journey is that the themes and the elements of cultivating community, tangible, on the ground, kind of village type community, are so often parallel or the same, maybe a slightly different format of what it takes to create culture inside an organization and to nurture culture and to honor the different types of relationships that exist inside an organization. So I do some corporate team coaching work with nonprofits and businesses, a lot of the time oriented around relationship dynamics. And again, can we get clear on what our shared vision is, and not just what we're trying to do as an organization, but how we're trying to work together to bring it about, and the roles we're each going to occupy, and the ways we're going to relate with each other and navigate conflict or navigate differences, different needs, different wants inside that process of trying to bring about, an impact, whatever that may be. So that is one piece. And I love that it parallels so often. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a covert agent inside organizations. I'm like, your business brought me in for, corporate coaching, but really we're here to build community inside your organization. So there's that side of things. And then what I find, I do one-on-one coaching and relationship coaching, and relationships, we're in relationship to everything. When you're working individually, and you might be doing this with a therapist or a coach or even just a good friend or some space that you process things, we're in relationship with our work. How do I want to relate to and with my work? We're in relationship with our daily habits. What is my relationship to how I nourish myself? And what is my relationship to, how the choices I make throughout the day, my relationship to my phone. Good Lord, I have a relationship with my phone.
Right. It's so true. Yeah.
And so, of course, we're not always orienting or contexting it that way. But what I've come to see, I worked one-on-one with folks for a long time before I moved into relationship coaching and team coaching. I've been coaching with individuals for just over a decade, and about half that time with couples and teams. But now when I look back, I'm like, oh, it's always been about relationship. The relationship we have with our own purpose, the relationship we have with ourself and our own belovedness and our own sense of worth, the relationship we have with our kids, et cetera, et cetera. So that work is a companioning work, a journeying with people to explore and better understand those relationships so they can design them, craft them in a ways that feel generative in their lives and aligned with their values and who they want to be and how they want to be in the world. And with couples and teams and partners, business partners or friends or adult parent-child dynamics, it's the same. How do we honor and cultivate this relationship in a way that meets the purpose or design we want for it, as opposed to some arbitrary way it should be?
Right.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you, and what's the process for them if they're interested in being coached by you one-on-one, or the relationship coaching, or even the course that you're doing around community building? What does it look like?
Thanks for pointing folks there, Josh. I'm on Instagram, along with so many others. I'm assuming
just a few others.
I'm assuming you'll drop links for folks so they can find
we'll put links in the show notes for sure.
You can also reach out to me. There's a contact form on my website, and really I am the human behind my Instagram account. You message me on Instagram. I'm actually a real human. I'm out
Amazing.
here. I'm interested. I'm not a bot. I'm not AI generated. I really am. I care. I always tell folks that, like, I'm an extrovert through and through. I have a really large relational capacity, and I love knowing people. I love knowing what they're up against. It helps inform the work I create. And so I really encourage folks, if something here resonates, like, send me a DM, fill out a contact form, say hello. If folks are interested in, all of the opportunities are out there, and links in bio, etc., are there for folks to find. And there's a bunch of free resources on my website too. So if folks are interested in that or want a taste of things, there's a free workshop on there and a free self-guided exercise. So there's a bunch of stuff that folks can engage with or get a taste of before committing.
Thanks for being so generous with your knowledge and your experience. The example of what you've done so intentionally in your immediate area, your neighborhood, is so inspiring, and it feels like doable, but it takes that, that somebody stepping up and saying, hey, let's be purposeful. Let's be consistent. Let's create some good rituals. It's so inspiring. And I feel like there are a lot of people in that same category that, whether they had positive or negative experiences in faith communities, they're grappling with the reality that even if it was coerced at times, you got to show up every Sunday and every Wednesday and whatever, that it built something really beautiful. The connections and the community and the rituals were really beautiful. And we have to be thoughtful about replacing that if we're going to step away from, those structures, or stay in those structures and still be purposeful. You can participate in a church and not really be building community.
Absolutely.
So I'm just inspired by all the work that you're doing, and really appreciate you coming and having this conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh.
Thanks for listening to the Clear and Loud podcast. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Our producer is Pam Cameron, and this episode contains music by Jeremy Yaddo at Music for Podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a boost by subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. Or if you have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode or a guest you'd like us to consider, email us at hello@clearandloud.com. You can also shoot us a direct message on Instagram. Our handle is @clearandloud. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.